but sometimes that excitement doesn't go well. Kelton and I were off air a couple of minutes ago. First of all, welcome back.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's exciting time of year. A lot of folks are out and got to work check stations last week. Got to talk to a lot of folks, and so I love this time of year. It's just nice to get out and visit with people, and hopefully they're out having a good time.
Safety issues come up every year, but it's not always about firearm safety. It's about there's some other things
Oh,
people have to be
yeah.
careful about.
Well, and the weird thing, was talking about a couple accidents to my friends. That was some of the thing that I mean, these are real close acquaintances, like good friends that I've hunted with and stuff before, and so it's just kind of a warning to everybody. When you're headed out in the woods, be prepared for the worst and hope for the best. I mean, 99.9% of the time, nothing's going to happen. But this last weekend, we had a gentleman. He took a buddy out hunting. Buddy wasn't going to hunt, just going along with him, trying to introduce this gentleman to the area. And they're up walking, and they're up in Unit 49 above Cary, and he gets on a trail that he wasn't too familiar with, a lot of snow on it, ice, cold morning, and it was pretty treacherous. I mean, there's about a 15, 20-foot drop off, and covered with ice and snow, and starts moving up there. And he goes, well, maybe we'd better turn around and see if we can find a better way up here. Starts turning around, and his buddy loses his footing, slid off the hill, hook to toe, landed in the creek on his head, and broke his femur when he flipped back down to the ground. And he was soaking wet early in the morning, really cold weather. I mean, if you remember last Saturday morning up in the Fairfield area where I was working, it was, I think, 12 degrees. And so getting soaking wet that early in the morning doesn't really do a body good.
No.
And so fortunately, his friend was prepared, and they splinted his leg, got him dried off, and they got Life Flight in there. But had another buddy that was up with he's not really what I call a horseman. He's been around horses, but he is in with his friend that had some good horses, and they're working along a rim, and ice and snow again, loses his footing. The horse falls, rolls over him, and then rolls to the bottom of the canyon. Really buggered him up, but it ended up killing the horse and breaking the rifle up. And so I tell these stories not to kind of freak people out, but just to, these guys are seasoned hunters, been out a lot. Things just happen. So I really suggest to everybody, I mean, tell people where you're going. Make sure you have an action list, if something does go haywire. My wife bought me this little communicator so that if something breaks down or things like that, it's a little satellite communicator. You can hit a button and it SOSs, and it's and there's several of them out there. I mean, DeLorme and Spot and Garmin and all these different companies make these type deals. And we're an aging population of hunters. I mean, in my mind, I feel 20, but my body is in the mid-50s, and so different things happen. So you just have to be prepared. Have matches. Have a safety blanket. Have some extra food. Have a little bit of rope. Have a way to start a fire. Make sure people know where you're at. Carry a cell phone, because a lot of the areas anymore you can get communication. So just go out and be prepared.
I know a lot of guys 70 that are in great shape, and it's not a problem for them to be out there doing this. But they may be 70, and if they haven't been out doing it in 5 years, maybe they should at least have a checkup or something before they go out.
You bet. Go out and get checked up. But you do. I guess when I look at it, if I was to go hunting, that wouldn't be a bad way to go. You want to be in shape, and you want to take care of yourself. But we had a gentleman last year, really good shape, and if he hadn't had his dogs, and he fell down, blew his knee out, and if his dogs kept him warm during the night. But just make sure that people know where you're at, and you have in worst case scenario, you have a way out.
Yeah. You know your surroundings, really.
You know your surroundings, and you've got a way to make contact, or somebody knows where you're at.
Fact,
those are the big things.
You have on here, you've got to have some survival gear along with you as well. Not everybody has 2 dogs to keep them warm.
Yeah, so that's why I like carrying a survival blanket. I actually usually have 3 to 4 dogs. No, but no,
well, you're taller.
Not all the time. I mean, if you're big game hunting and stuff like that. But I always carry a survival blanket, and matches and stuff to start a fire and things like that. And I mean, it's just kind of a good rule of thumb never to go out. We've had several cases that people just run up to the South Hills, get turned around, it gets dark, they don't have a flashlight, they kind of they lose their direction. They can't see Twin Falls from the canyon they're in. They really don't have a direction to go by, and so you just need to have those little things with you.
Yeah, when you pop out in downtown Rogerson and your goal is Twin Falls,
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
you missed the mark.
Well, if you pop out in downtown Rogerson, you walked a long ways to get there.
Yes, that's true. We have a caller with us. It's 9:12, and Kelton Hatch from Idaho Fish and Game is in studio with us this hour. 35 right now. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air.
Hey, you're talking about dogs, and a friend of mine at work came back from hunting last week, and he mentioned that there was a really nice buck that he was drawing on, and every time he'd get it in the sights, the buck would just take off, and he's looking around, and then all of a sudden he realized there was some guys out there that had a dog that was running the dog on the deer. People, keep your dogs under control. For a number of reasons. Number one, you're going to piss somebody off because they're not going to get the deer that they want, but your dog might get shot.
No, and you're exactly right. There's a law against harassment of wildlife. There's also a law against being involved trying to keep a hunter from making a harvest. And so, and every winter, and I mean, we're getting that type of year. This gentleman makes a great point. It's getting that time of year. Animals are starting to move to winter ranges. We've got a lot of deer around town and stuff like that. And one of our major issues is wildlife and pet conflicts, where they get chasing deer and things like this, or elk. And if it's a continuous issue, we will do citations and go in and talk to the pet owner and stuff like that. And so, yeah, that's a good one. Just always keep your animals under control.
I know that when my dad was with the New York State Parks Department and they would have dogs that were chasing deer, they didn't even ask questions. They generally put the dogs down.
You know, and we do that in some cases. It depends on the location and how bad it is and what's going on. Last year in Sun Valley, we had a couple of deer that were killed in town by people's pets and things like that. And so, but no, it's always good. The thing is if you're walking your dog in the woods, make sure you have control. One of our biggest, it was always kind of a joke when I worked up in Alaska. You never took a dog with you into the bush, because if your dog really liked you and a moose started chasing it, there's a good chance your dog will run back between your legs, and that's where the moose is going to try to go if he's chasing the dog. And so you need to have your dog under control. You don't want them trashing on deer and elk or running, or they may get injured themselves. A lot of times you'll hear of coyotes that'll bait dogs out and stuff like that. People will be out walking, and their goal is to get that dog away from the owner, and then the pack will come in and they'll take care of the dog because they don't mind eating dog. And so you need to really keep your animals under control and have them well trained.
You also wanted to bring up today check station results. We were going to start there, and we ended up on safety, but just expectations that people may have.
Things went really well. What we anticipated happening this year pretty much happened. We had a pretty tough winter last year. Survival was really good in the central part of the Magic Valley, 54, 55, 48, portions of 49, and 43. We've had tremendous harvest. Nearly as good, if not better, in some of those areas, and even last year. The Little Wood, however, most of it, we're down about 2%. We only checked 26 animals, and last year we checked 34. Elk numbers were up and doing really well, and still doing really well even after last winter. At the Goodings check station was where we was down the most. We went. No, it wasn't Gooding. It was the Timmerman check station. We went from 26% harvest success down to 14%, and so we did see a portion of those hunters were coming out further north, as well as part of 49, right there above Haley, Ketchum, in that area. But however, over in the Timmerman check station, talked to over 750 hunters, and we had about a 23% harvest success, and that was really close to last year, and that's what we anticipated. We saw a lot of young of the year deer. Um, I mean, yearlings from last year that didn't have any winter mortality. And so harvest has been going well. People seem to be happy, and we've got lots and lots of elk. So you guys with those elk tags, count yourself fortunate because it looks like it's going to be a really, really good elk year.
As bad as it was last winter, and it really the issues for most wildlife was really confined though to just seems a few parts of the state.
It was, and and the interesting thing we had. I'm from eastern Idaho originally, and so it was pretty mild winter here, even though it was kind of tough for the Magic
Compared to
Valley.
there, yeah.
But when you start looking at, traditional winters, I mean, last winter was more of a normal winter, and in the last 15, 20 years, it's just been really easy winters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you start looking at the historical data and stuff like that, our deer that went into winter in good shape, that had good body fat, did really well. We have seen some mortality on some of our game birds, and then other species of game birds are doing really well. But I think if people, it's just a good time to get out and have some fun. And there's plenty of wildlife out there. If you haven't got your deer tag, you still have until the end of the month. And some of the units will be closing on the 24th. But then there's also a lot of whitetail hunting opportunity up north, and numbers are looking really good there.
Those animals that are out there, though, are very healthy because it's the unhealthy ones we generally lose.
Exactly. And so, my son, he was able to get a deer the other day, and it was delicious. The portions we had already, and so, I mean, the animals are in good shape. The body fat on them this year is really good. They had a good summer and put on some good body fat. And if you want to keep up on some of the things that are going on, I usually always throw this out there, but we have our Facebook page. It has been kind of interesting. We've been putting a lot of deer harvest photos on there from check stations, and got a lot of feedback and got a lot of pictures from other people on animals that they had harvested. And so it's kind of a fun forum for sportsmen to get to say something or at least look at other animals that have been being harvested in the area. And that's at Idaho Fish and Game, Magic Valley.
We want to mention Kelton Hatch is with us until 10 o'clock this morning. We have a short break. He's representing Idaho Fish and Game. If you've got a question or comment, plenty of time still to get that in, but we're going to take a short break. Bill Colley as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. We're at 36. Joining us in the studio, Kelton Hatch from Idaho Fish and Game. We're at 923. We're at 35. Bill Colley as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. We were talking check stations, and in the last segment of the program, we didn't quite finish up because a couple people may have a couple of more questions on that, but I think Kelton's going to answer them before they even chime in.
So, one of the things I wanted to mention is the things that we run into, some of the issues that we run into at check stations, is people don't validate their tags correctly, and they don't leave evidence of sex on the animal, the sex of the animal, whether it's a doe or a buck. And you can't remove the head of the animal unless you leave something else on there to identify the sex of the animal. And so we had a lot of those come through this last week. We tried to educate on those, as long as we don't think people are trying to pull the wool over our eyes and get away with something. But then also I wanted to address last hour, you talked about waterfowl hunters, and waterfowl hunting is going on, and I think it's incredibly fun sport for people. It puts some good protein on the table. It's a great way to get out. But one of the major issues we are running into is people shooting in the direction of homes on the river because of these new subdivisions. And the only thing that this is going to do, if sportsmen continue to do this, is close down certain sections of the river, because we have a public safety issue in there. And so people need to be very respectful and very mindful of others. One of the things that I have a really rough time with is I'm glad that people like to get out and enjoy hunting, but there's no room for competition or getting my game by all means necessary. Always take the ethical shot. always make sure your backdrop. Think of others. There's not a deer on the mountain that's worth fighting for. There's not a duck worth fighting for. And so just get out, have fun, and make it a good, memorable experience.
I believe we have a caller looking to join us, and you may have answered the question. 208-736-0300 is the number. 208-736-0300. Since we're in a shorter segment here, you wanted to also mention there's a new video out for people. And again, we have a lot of people we're trying to bring into this activity, and a lot of people. I'll tell you what, if you took me out there and said you got to field dress this deer, I wouldn't know where to start. And as one of my old teachers said, he said the first mistake most people make is they break the bladder and then nothing's any good.
Yeah, well, and it can be a daunting task. You get a 300-pound or 200-pound or a 600-pound animal on the ground, gill an elk or five, right in that area, and you have to piece it out so that you can get it out of the woods, because you just don't pick it up and haul it out whole. And so what we have, if you go to our webpage at fishandgame.idaho.gov, there's a video on there. It's called How to Field Dress Your Game Animal. And it goes through a step-by-step. And, it's a good refresher for everybody. But it's really good for these new hunters that have never been out and about. Kind of gives them, not everybody had the opportunity to grow up with a great-grandfather and a grandfather and a grandmother and a mother and 14 other uncles and aunts that hunted. Some of them are first-generation hunters. And so this is just kind of a way, or you've been out of it for a while, and you got a kid that wants to learn how to hunt. Go to our webpage, our Facebook page or webpage, and look at that, and you can watch that and learn a little bit more.
I wanted to point out too, as well, there's some great video archives there. There's the infamous one. Well, I won't say infamous, famous one that still I have friends commenting about more than I think a year later about the beavers parachuting.
Yeah. We've got quite a collection. I mean, I put quite a few videos out on just even bear baiting, on how the correct way to bear bait, ideas on how to do that, on fishing opportunities in the area, different fishing ponds, and they put them out across the state. And so, no, our video archives are pretty extensive, and so if you're looking for something, or just tired of jumping around Netflix or YouTube and everything, you can go on there and look at some of our videos.
You know what that video with the beaver reminded me of? When we were kids growing up, and there was a stretch with Lassie had a forest ranger as a master. Corey was his name, and he was always up in the mountains, and they were fighting fires or they were doing rescues. And when I saw that old video and just the beautiful backcountry, that's exactly what it reminded me of, was those scenes in the TV show from when I was a kid 50 years ago.
Yeah. Well, that's what made you fall in love with the West, probably. And then but nope. They've done some fairly crazy things to help wildlife in the past. Well, you laugh about that and crazy things. I mean, I thought you might get a kick out of this. I didn't put this down on our list, but this last week we had a moose in downtown in the Golden Eagle subdivision outside of Haley this last week, with a hammock in its antlers. And I guess the reason I'm telling you this is be careful around bull moose right now. They're in rut. It's breeding season for them. They can get a little aggressive, and this bull got really aggressive with a hammock, tore it all up, had blinders on, couldn't see where he was going, so we went up there and climbed out onto a person's tennis court and was able to put a dart in this moose to tranquilize him, to be able to go up and take the hammock off of him so that he could continue functioning for the rest of the year. But it's kind of interesting, some of the different things that you run into and end up doing.
That's a little bit like the farmer's insurance commercial with the moose attacking the swing set.
Swing set, yeah. Except when this one flipped, it didn't fly off. It stayed wrapped around his antlers.
We've got more coming up with Kelton Hatch. One more half hour with Kelton Hatch from Idaho Fish and Game on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 35. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story. Kelton Hatch joins us in the studio on a monthly basis. We've kicked around to the idea of maybe doing this more often too. And stay tuned. Maybe we'll have more details on that coming up in the next couple of months. It's 9:34, 35 right now. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. We were having a discussion about driving and some of the. We're getting into a time of year, of course, where you're going to have weather issues, but you also have a lot of wildlife that is just traveling. I saw my first flock of geese the other day.
Yep, things are starting to migrate, and I just wanted to warn people. Right now on Highway 20 between Timmerman and Mountain Home, we're averaging 2 to 3 deer that are killed a night up there by motor vehicles. We've got heavy migration going on. They're migrating out of some of that high country down into their early winter ranges, and so I just wanted to throw that out there that people need to slow down and be aware. We're always in a hurry to get to wherever we're going as quick as we can, so we lock it on 82 miles an hour because we think we get that little grace of 2 miles an hour over the speed limit. And the only thing that does is slow our reaction time when we see Bambi jump in front of us or an elk. We had an elk that was hit just down by Bliss and totaled a vehicle and had a lot of injuries to them on 84. And then we're starting to see deer migration along 84 and all the other highways around the area. So if I run at 70 miles an hour at night, it may take me 10 minutes longer to go, to get anywhere, but or 20, but at least I have that reaction time that I can slow down if I'm going through Sweetser or if I'm going down to Jackpot or if I'm, running to Sun Valley, any direction that you leave the Magic Valley. I mean, even around town, you just need to be looking for that eye glint in the borrow pit, and then just be aware of your surroundings. If you got a cornfield, a lot of harvest is coming down. We've got lots and lots of deer that have been displaced because their corn has been cut and it's getting cut. And so they're moving around, and we're starting to see more deer. I mean, like the other night, I was on Falls driving down the road and waited for 5 deer to cross out of one cornfield into another, and the one had been cut, and they're just out there grazing right along Falls. But if I hadn't have been aware, it was right there at that really kind of dusky area, I could have tagged one pretty easy. So
Yeah.
Be really cautious. But the other thing I wanted to mention.
Your freezer's already full, so.
Yeah, that's true. And so, but if someone does hit one, we do have a law. It's called a salvage law, and you can pull over and claim that animal as your own. And all you need to do is go to the Fish and Game website, click on Roadkill Harvest, and you can fill out the roadkill report, and then it will print you out a paper, and that will be your tag for that animal. I don't think people take advantage of this because I don't know that 50 pounds of meat is worth a $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 car bill to get your car fixed. But there is that opportunity for people so that we can salvage these animals and use them.
We have another caller joining us. It's 9:37, and caller, you're up next. You're on KLIX. Go ahead.
Good morning, guys. I really enjoy it when Kelton comes. It's kind of reason born and raised in Idaho, and I had an opportunity this weekend. A friend from Rupert, he turns 90 today, and he drew on a cow moose in the Island Park area, and this falls right in line with the vehicles and the wildlife. We seen a couple of cow moose, and they were on one side of the highway, and it was only 300 yards across to the other side, which would have been legal. We talked about kind of making them go that direction, and there's so much traffic. I could just see it would have been somebody could have got killed. The moose for sure, but they're so big. We had to, for one time in my life, I had common sense, and we said we better not do this. So but another thing I wanted to bring up was, the cow moose, they're so docile, and it's just about like shooting the Black Angus. I wonder if I may go to one of the meetings this year and kind of bring something up. Maybe it should be just a youth hunt and anybody over 70 or something, and to keep these people interested, start them and get them interested in hunting. What do you guys think about that?
I don't think that there's ever a bad idea. I like that opportunity. I think I'm tickled that you was able to take a 90-year-old friend out and harvest a moose. I mean, what a great memory for him. And I see your point on the youth, but and it could change if we had enough voices that went in that direction. Probably right now, I don't know whether it would at this point, but I think any of those ideas are always good ideas to kick around, and we appreciate people that come to our big game meetings and throw ideas out there because it just keeps us thinking and trying to make things better for the sportsmen of Idaho. But I do appreciate your comments, and I'm glad you didn't try to haze them across a busy road. Otherwise, you may end up with two, and so, but thanks for the call.
I want to thank you. We have a short break, and then we're going to wrap up with Kelton Hatch in the next segment of the program. He's joining us from Idaho Fish and Game this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com with Bill Colley on Top Story. Kelton Hatch joins us from Idaho Fish and Game on a monthly basis, and that is today as well, 9:41 and 35. Bill Colley with you on Top Story as well on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And before we get back to any of your comments or questions, Kelton has a couple of things he wants to wrap up with, but there's that old line that I've heard, it's a joke that says no good deed goes unpunished. You have a line here that says caught in the act of doing good.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting little deal. A few years ago, we had one of our biologists that came up with an idea to get a little it's a coin that we had forged out here in the Magic Valley. A gentleman forged it for us, and it's a rancher or a cowboy guy in a cowboy hat holding a little bird, and he's putting it back in a nest, and it's on a silver coin, and it's caught in the act of doing something good. And we had a gentleman, his name is Steve Goebel, and his family have a long history of fishing in the Magic Valley and wanted to give something back. And he and his dad fished at the Hagerman Wildlife Management Area for years, and we went down and we did some rehab on the ponds, and Steve came to us and privately purchased 3,000 bluegill that were over 2 inches from a private hatchery, and wanted to release them down there so that we could increase the number of fish in those fisheries and give a better opportunity to the youth and the other sportsmen of Idaho. And so we just wanted to kind of throw him out there a kudos. We appreciate his help and his willingness to give back to the community. That's something that'll everybody can utilize. And the nice thing about bluegill, they're very prolific, and so and they grow fast in those ponds. We cleaned up all those back ponds a couple of years ago down there, got rid of the carp, and the water's clean, and we really think we're going to have some tremendous bluegill ponds. We've been having a rough time getting enough bluegill for it, and he came in and done that to us, so we wanted to thank him for that.
We're going to, before we get to some more details on fishing and fish in general, I do want to mention we'll squeeze a caller in here. It's 9:43, and telephone number 208-736-0300. And caller, you're up next. You're on Top Story.
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen. Hey, going to ask you, down there in Hagerman, since you just mentioned those ponds, you guys did a phenomenal job of cleaning those up and making them nice for everybody.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. But you forgot about one group of people when you did that. The older folks that like the float tube. I happen to know a good friend. He can't fish down there anymore in his float tube because he can't get in and out of the water. The only place there is to do it is by one of them buildings. There's some cement, but it's got so much moss on it, he's scared he's going to fall and hurt himself.
Well, that's a good point.
I don't think it'd take much. I really don't. But, if you guys would kind of put some thought into that, and because, the float tubers, the fly fishermen, they really enjoy it down there, and this particular person really missed. He hadn't been down there all year just because of that.
Well, I hate to hear that. I know that we've been very well utilized. I think it's actually made since we opened that the Riley Pond up and we put that trench out there. The fly fishermen have really been having some great success out there. But that's a good point, and I'll talk to our access manager and see if there's something that they can't put some riprap or some type of a rock ramp in so that moss doesn't affect it as much, and you've got some sharper edges to be able to walk down into that pond on, and that is a good idea. Thanks.
And I got an email too I wanted to share. This comes from Kathleen. She says it's not all laughs and giggles for landowners during hunting season. Our ranch is in Unit 49, right where the guy broke his leg last week. She says we deal with garbage everywhere, and as usual, we have the guys that pull the plug on their septic tanks as they drive out. Our neighbors had a guy kill an antelope on the road in front of their house, and the round went through their house barn, horse barn rather. She said, up here, it's sometimes the worst of the worst.
And I feel for, and we hear the horror stories. The thing is Yeah, no, I feel for her. And that's one thing that sportsmen have to remember. And we can't paint all sportsmen with the same brush because it's just like the same thing when I'm driving down Blue Lakes. I don't cuss at everybody, just a couple. And so,
You're better than I am.
you know, and so because there's only a few of us that drive like me, and then I get mad at them. But she makes a really good point, and it's just another thing for sportsmen to put in the back of their mind. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Treat other people's property the way you want your front yard treated. You know, if you don't want somebody driving by and cleaning their car out on your yard, or locking their truck into four-wheel drive and digging ruts across your yard, or shooting firearms in your front yard, you need to think of others at the same, because this is their front yard. Their front yard may be 40,000 acres, or 10,000 acres, or 40 acres, but it still means just as much to them, all that land, as your quarter-acre lot that you have in town, or your 10-acre lot you have outside of town. So just think of others when you're out there.
We have another caller with us. Caller, you're up next at 9:46 on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Yes. When is Idaho going to put some teeth, some sharp teeth, in their hunting, trespassing laws, hunting laws, et cetera, et cetera? If you harvest game illegal in, I'm going to say, like you said, Alaska, you lose your vehicle you drove there in, you lose your gun, you lose your rights to hunt. Put some teeth in our trespass, our game violation laws. And I am a sportsman, but I feel like the animal needs a chance too. Thank you.
No, I appreciate his comment, and that's something that's going to happen socially. We go around and we talk to the courts and all the time, and those are legislated laws. Our legislators are the ones that put those through. The hard part when we're talking about animals and people is, I guess sometimes a lot of people don't believe that our crimes against people punishments aren't strong enough either, and so we can't make the punishments against people that do crimes to animals or wildlife more stringent than what happens to a human and things like that. And so we really need to, I don't know. He makes a really good point. We do have if someone is caught and a landowner signs the trespassing citation on somebody that is trespassing, it is a mandatory loss of the hunting license for 1 year. But the landowner or the land manager is the one that has to sign that. And so I don't know, but that's a good question or comments to take to your local legislator.
All right, we're going to mention a couple of things about fishing in the latter part of the program here. So we're sort of flipped it, because in the summer months we generally open with fishing and then we talk hunting, and today we've done it the other way around.
Yeah, and my buddies that are fishermen are glad, because they say, well, we don't need to quite, talk about fishing so much and get more people out there fishing. But this is their favorite time of year, because they say that the fall fishing is the best because all the hunters are out hunting, and those sometimes fishermen are out hunting. Yeah. And so, but right now we did open up the Steelhead Harvest season. This has been very controversial. We had a lower return than normal. The fish that we are harvesting, people have to remember, are the ones that come from hatcheries. These are hatchery fish that we planted, just like we have a hatchery truck that goes out to the lake and dumps in trout. These steelhead that are migrating back in are just like these hatchery fish, and we figure we're going to have about 37,000 hatchery fish coming in, and we're going to try to harvest about 22,000 of those. We'll have those rest of those go into the system where we can take the eggs and repropagate those populations of fish so that they can be sent back out to sea next year. But the season's open. You cannot keep any fish over 20 if it's got to be less than 28 inches this year. And they feel that'll help protect those older fish, even if it has no adipose fin. Those are the only fish that you can keep. Those are hatchery fish. We clip the adipose fin, that little fin on their back just before their tail. If you don't know what that is, go into the rule book and they'll show you right where it's at. But season did open, so go to the Fish and Game website. You can read up more on that and some of the rules, and where we're expecting fish, and get out and have a little bit of fun steelheading.
We've got another caller with us. Caller, you're about 10 minutes away now from 10 o'clock, and you're up next. You're on Top Story on KLIX.
Mr. Hatch, I have a question about how does Fish and Game go about moving the elk or the deer that are on private land back into the public land so that the public hunter can hunt those animals? What do they do about that?
You know, if you can come up with a solution for that, you'd make $1 billion. That's one of those things we're struggling with every day. We're getting more and more of this private land that these animals are using for refuges. We get depredation issues on those private lands. What we're trying to do in the Wood River Valley right now and some of these other places, we're trying to give out more permits to try to push those animals back out of there. But, you know, it's nearly impossible when we've got hunters that are, sometimes we just can't put enough pressure on them to get them out. We've had hazing. We hire hazers in the summer because a lot of the times these elk, we've got elk in areas that we're not used to having them. I mean, out in the Bennetts, this population has started in the Bennetts and out through some of those areas since I started here 15 years ago. The elk just keep moving more and more to these agricultural lands, and they found a nice home because they can go eat alfalfa in the morning and eat corn at night. And so it's really hard to get them out of there. And so that's one of those ongoing battles that we're facing, trying to figure out ways to keep those animals off private land. And right now it's just trying to give out a few extra tags to landowners to allow some of their neighbors and people that they know to be able to harvest those and hopefully haze them out of there so that the other sportsmen can get their shot at them too.
I want to thank you for the call. Coming up at 9:53. Speaking of fishing, there's a new salmon record of you wanted to mention as well.
You know, and I just threw that in there that we have a catch and release. I just want to throw this out. We have a catch and release record book because we got it's interesting. My grandmother she was raised during the Depression, and born in the teens, and I grew up fishing with her, and I always joke that there was never a fish that she caught that would be turned loose because if she caught it, it was worth eating. Things have changed a lot. We've got a lot of anglers that go out there and go fishing, and they just fish for the pure joy of it, and they catch a fish, they turn it loose, and so we've got this record book for catch and release, and they just put a new fish in there. The coho season had opened, and the old state record was 11 pounds 7 ounces. The new world's record is 33 pounds and 4 ounces. And so what we do with these is you can weigh them and take a picture of them, lay a tape measure. For some reason they didn't put the length of this animal in there, this fish in there, and but you take a measuring tape and you measure how long it was, and you try not to keep the fish out of the water too long so you don't kill it, but just you can go to our website again and see the rules and how to exactly enter that. So it's kind of fun to see a record. I feel bad for the gentleman that had it before because it was only 11 pounds and the new one's 33, but it's kind of fun to see a record broke.
Yeah, and smashed, really.
Yeah.
We have another caller with us at 9:54. Caller, you're up next, and you're on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.
Thanks, and I'm glad to have you on this morning, Kelton. I'm a longtime hunter, born and raised Idaho, and I've got I guess an observation or at least a theory on why these elk are moving down into the private land, and that's ever since the introduction of these wolves in the back country. It seems like these elk they're getting pressured in the back country, and they're moving closer and closer to civilization, and so they're trying to find that buffer zone between, getting eaten by wolves and getting shot by hunters, and so that's why they're where they're at. And I've seen it out there. I hunt the backcountry, and I've just not seen the elk that I used to, and I'm seeing more and more elk kind of in closer and in those halfway areas. So I just want to make that comment, and I'll hang up from here. Thanks. Bye.
I think he's I think he's absolutely right on that. We've seen that change because we used to have a big feed station at the Big Smoky area. When wolves were introduced, those elk started a new migration, and they started the migration out. And now it's kind of interesting. We put enough pressure on those elk in the backcountry now with rifles. Unit 43. Last week when I went up to work the check station, we had almost an 80% migration of deer out of Unit 43 at like within 4 days of the season opening. And what's happened up there is we've got 4,000 or 5,000 hunters going into 43 and 48 to hunt. Well, those deer have found out if I walk into 44, we've only got 100 hunters that have controlled hunt tags in that unit. So I can go from 5,000 hunters shooting at me to 100 hunters. Pretty good deal, And I think those elk have found the same thing with wolves, and I think they found the same thing with hunters. We've got a lot of these elk that as soon as the first bullet or first arrow flies, they say, well, I can go down to George's over here and get down by his pivot and set out there in the middle of the field, and I can see anybody coming towards me. And usually people don't shoot at me, and I can make a living out here. And that's the problem we're starting to see.
I want to thank him for the call, and this is an ever-changing world when it comes to various wildlife that we deal with, and a lot of this has been because of government interventions, and we won't get to it today, but I was just commenting to Kelton off air that the governor has said he thinks it's time to rethink the last administration's efforts on sage grouse. And he said, Washington and Oregon can do whatever they please. In other words, we'll do what we want to do. And he may have some help now with Ryan Zinke and some other people who are involved in government who come from the West, and have a better look at how things actually work here than some desk jockey in Washington.
And it's always interesting to see how administrations change management of wildlife. And we actually may end up having a grizz hunt for the 1,000 grizzly bears that are in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, which it's time that we have something like that. And so, and the sage grouse are the same thing. It's, numbers are holding pretty fair, stable right now. And, but it's an ever changing, view on how wildlife is managed, especially some of these that are on the endangered species list. And so, that's the enjoyable part about this job. It's never the same thing the next day.
We'll see you again, at least in a month, if not sooner.
And if anytime you want me on, I appreciate all the calls. That's my favorite part about coming and doing this radio show is getting to hear from the sportsmen and the folks that are listening, hear their opinions. I've heard it all. You can't hurt my feelings. Sorry. Unless you talk mean about my wife or my kids, I'm fine.
We'll talk to Kelton again soon. And just a quick mention, speaking of hunters, the gun guys are back tomorrow morning just after 9 o'clock. And God willing, the creek don't rise. I'll be here at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.